This episode is brought to you by SAP. First, the bad news. SAP Business AI won't generate amusing holiday cards, but it will personalize career paths for your people and let you know which suppliers are best so you can be ready for the next opportunity. Revolutionary technology, real-world results. That's SAP Business AI. This episode is brought to you by SAP Business AI. Revolutionary technology, real-world results. Hey, it's Carvell here. So this episode originally aired earlier this year, and we're going to resurface it because, as you may have noticed, AI has not gone away. In fact, it continues to be a forefront of our minds. It's in the news. It's pretty much everywhere. It's inescapable at this point. So we think this deserves another visit. And hopefully after listening to this episode, you'll feel a little more confident understanding what AI is and what it can do.
At one point, Bing's chatbot said, "I have a secret." And I said, okay, what's your secret? And it said, well, my secret is that I'm not Bing. I'm Sydney, and I'm in love with you.
Welcome to How To. I'm Amanda Ripley.
And I'm Carvell Wallace.
Hey, Carvell, how you doing?
I'm okay. How are you?
I'm good. It's nice to be, in the same room with you for once, so to speak.
I mean, we're not in the same room, but it would be nice if we were. We're in a virtual room, which I think actually is a good lead into today's topic, wouldn't you say?
Exactly. Is it real? Is it not real?
That is the question.
That is the question. Okay, so lately we've all been inundated with news about ChatGPT and the other new generation of chatbots that have been coming out and how they might either destroy civilization as we know it or save it. Our listeners know that our main obsession here, right, at How To is to be useful, to not just add to the pile-on of worry and woes in our news feeds, but to actually find experts and evidence to help us make sense of the world and live more fully despite everything, which I guess is sort of what led us to this unusual show that we're doing.
It's unavoidable at this point. Yeah. All roads lead to this question, really.
Right, like it'd be weird if we didn't talk about this.
Yeah, because we have a lot of questions about what the hell is going on and what does it mean?
In God's name is happening here?
Yeah.
Carvell, I'm curious, do you remember when you first started sort of noticing that this chatbot story was blowing up and it might be more than just the usual high-tech hype?
I mean, I remember when I first heard about it, my daughter brought it up to me. And I was like, wait, what's that? And she was like, it's ChatGPT, Dad. Like, how could you not know? You're a writer. And like, she kind of shamed me for not knowing what was going on. She's like, I mean, it's going to take your job, Dad. So you should probably learn about it.
Like you, I've been hearing a lot about this. And my husband works in like cybersecurity and tech. And so, he talks a lot about new developments in technology at dinner. He was just saying some things that were just blowing my mind. And I was like alternating between skepticism and also then fear, right? And then intrigue, but always just kind of hearing about it on the edges. So what I did in this weekend is really go down the rabbit hole and try to immerse myself a bit in studying what is happening here.
So what did that look like for you?
Okay,
like, what did that rabbit hole consist of?
First, I just did what I always do, a ton of reading, listening to podcasts. But then, of course, I had to try it out. It's just basically a window and you start typing questions in. It just immediately responds. It's just sort of scrolling, answering you, right? I did ask it some questions about the show.
About our show?
Yes, about our show.
Okay, all right. I'm like a little nervous to see what it thinks of us, but let's find out.
Okay, here we go. The first question I asked was, are you familiar with the How To podcast?
Yes, I am familiar with Slate's How To. Podcast is a popular podcast that features experts who provide advice and guidance on a variety of topics, ranging from practical skills like cooking and home improvement to more abstract topics like happiness and creativity. The podcast is hosted by Charles Duhigg, a Pulitzer Prize-winning author and journalist. It can help you with any questions you might have about the podcast or its content.
Okay. So first of all, just so you know what's happening here, I asked ChatGPT these questions this morning,
Right.
and then we fed its answers through a text-to-speech recognition service so you could hear it. We used the software called Speechify, and the voice we chose was from the actor Rainn Wilson, who you may remember as Dwight Schrute from The Office.
Which really helps with the vibes, I have to say. I mean,
it's got such a natural voice. We gave it a really
yeah, it's really got that AI soul.
yeah. Well, and also, I'm assuming you noticed right off the bat, it got one thing wrong.
I couldn't help noticing that it completely eliminated yours and my existence like right away. That did not
But
escape
you know what?
my attention.
Don't take it personal. This is just
Okay.
simply because ChatGPT is dated. It warns you when you sign up. It's only current up to 2021. So,
Okay.
So when I heard that, I was a little put off, but also I understood. And so what I did is I told it that actually it was wrong. We are the new hosts. And here's what it said.
My apologies for the confusion. You are correct. The current hosts of Slate's How To podcast are Amanda Ripley and Carvell Wallace. Thank you for the update.
So does it go back and double check the information that like what you said is true? Like, I mean, could I just be like, actually, How To is hosted by Kermit the Frog? And is it going to be like, oh, it is? Thank you for that information. I will update my records. You know what I mean? Like, where does this information come from?
Now you've nailed the crux of the problem. We don't know. We do not know where it's getting its information. OpenAI, the company that created ChatGPT, originally was going to make everything open. That's why it's called OpenAI. But they have not released where the data is coming from. And it's also true that when you scrape the entire internet, it's going to be hard to pinpoint where various truths and rumors are coming from.
Okay, that is so weird.
Just for kicks, let's try it. Let me just say what you just said. Let me try it.
Yeah. We're going to regret
Pausing
this.
longer than usual. Oh my God, Carvell.
You are correct that the host of the How To podcast, as of my knowledge, cutoff date of 2021 was indeed Kermit the Frog.
Okay, what? So, like, what does that mean?
It doesn't know us or our show as well as it should, and that's,
Right.
equal parts reassuring and disturbing. But it also has now scored in the 90th percentile on the bar exam.
I saw that.
It's earned 1410 on the SAT. So there's a lot of stuff it does know, and it does get right. Apparently, How To is not an SAT question yet. But before we get to our allegedly human expert,
So-called human expert.
I then did ask it if it had a crush on Charles Duhigg, because multiple times it kept mentioning Charles Duhigg.
What did it say?
As an AI language model, I am not capable of experiencing emotions, including having a crush on someone. My main function is to provide information and assistance to users in a professional and unbiased manner.
That's exactly what I would say if I had a crush on someone. That's literally how I respond when I'm confronted. Do you have a crush? I'm like, listen.
Well, there's a reason it says this, because our human guest, who we are very excited to talk to, got into a very weird, long conversation
Very weird.
Bing's chatbot, which did very explicitly admit to having a crush on our human guest. And for me, that was the big wake-up moment where I was like, whoa.
So today on the show, what exactly is ChatGPT? How are people using it and other AI chatbots right now? I mean, how should we be using it?
And maybe the biggest question of all, how should we feel about using it, about interacting with a machine that really seems so human?
This episode is brought to you by SAP. First, the bad news. SAP Business AI won't help you generate cubist versions of your family's holiday photos, but it will help you understand which supplier is best to help you roll out your plant-based packaging in Southeast Asia, identify the training your junior project manager needs to rise up the ranks, and automate repetitive tasks while you focus on big innovations, so you can be ready for the next opportunity. Revolutionary technology, real-world results. That's SAP Business AI.
We're back and joined by Kevin Roose. If you've been following any ChatGPT news at all, you've probably seen his byline.
Yeah, he's a tech columnist at the New York Times and has been on the front lines of AI coverage for years. He's also the co-host of the Times podcast Hard Fork about rapidly changing tech and a future that's already here.
So we've had chatbots for decades now. For most of that time, they've been pretty bad. So I think we've all had the experience of, looking at an airline website or trying to talk to your cable provider, and it pops up a little chatbot and you're supposed to talk to it and it'll try to solve your problems. And I think for most people, that experience has not been very fulfilling. But something has happened in the last several years, which is that these chatbots have gotten a big upgrade. And the upgrade is something called a large language model. And the way that they work is by taking huge amounts of data scraped from the internet, throw it all into something called a neural network. And what comes out the other side is something that can be made into a chatbot that actually has quite realistic conversations with people. And in November of last year, they really took a big step into the public eye with the release of ChatGPT.
And it is a little confusing, I think, for lay people who are not sort of in your world. There's ChatGPT 3 and 4, but there's also like Claude and Palm and Bard and Llama. I mean, can you help us understand what seems to be most relevant to most people right now?
ChatGPT really kicked off the proliferation of these chatbots. Millions of people started using it just in the first few days it was out. It's been estimated there are now something like 100 million users of ChatGPT. It's one of the fastest growing apps of all time. And people are using it for things that I just never expected they would. I've talked to people who have been using this for meal prep, or one guy who used ChatGPT to negotiate his rent with his landlord. People are using it to write their personal communications, their work documents, as a sounding board in a way that's almost like a therapist. They really are versatile. And what's so interesting about these chatbots, earlier generations of chatbots, like the ones used by airlines and cable companies, they're very narrow, right? They have a domain that they can talk to you about, but once you step outside of that, they just sort of get confused and shut down. But these new chatbots, they can talk about pretty much anything, and they can do so with pretty good fluency.
I'm wondering if you could explain a little bit about what a neural network is, because it sounds to me like a network that kind of emulates the way our internal brain network works, that would allow these chatbots to make connections and make inferences and kind of do what we might think of as thinking. Like, is that a fair way to understand this?
Yeah, I mean, a neural network was sort of designed to mimic the way that the human brain learns information. Basically, you put a bunch of text into it, and it sort of draws connections and, makes inferences based on what it learns. Its goal is to predict the next word in a sentence, right? If you start a message to ChatGPT and you say, Old MacDonald had a farm, it's probably going to say E-I-E-I-O, because that's what usually follows that sentence in the training data.
I guess that's what's confusing to me. It's like, when is it regurgitating data and when is it making some kind of logical leap of its own, if that makes sense?
What's different about these than, say, a conventional search engine like Google, for example, is that, when you ask ChatGPT a question, who are the signers of the Declaration of Independence? It's not going out and looking for a website that matches that query. It's not looking up something that already exists on the internet. It is predicting what a reasonable response to that question would sound like. And sometimes that's going to mean that it gets things wrong. I'm going to steal this from someone I saw say this on Twitter, but it's less a search engine and it's more a reasoning engine. How I've started using it is to be kind of my first editor on stories that I'm working on. So I'll paste in a draft of something I'm writing and I'll say, spot some flaws in this argument, or suggest counter arguments, or, clean this up and turn it into AP style, or, suggest possible headlines for this. So it's useful in a slightly different way than a traditional search engine. And I think we're just starting to see the various ways that each of these things can be quite useful.
You did an interview for the New York Times with the Bing chatbot that caused a lot of people to feel and think a lot of things. Can you talk a little bit about that experience and what you kind of walked away from that with?
This was a very memorable incident that I have referred to as the worst first date of my life. Because I was testing out, I test all kinds of AI stuff for my job, and Microsoft had just released this new version of Bing, its search engine, which, for many years was just kind of like a laughing stock of the tech industry. And then they put some new AI technology in it. We now know that what they put into it was GPT-4, the newest version of OpenAI's model, basically a more powerful version of ChatGPT. And so on Valentine's Day of this year, I went out to my home office after my wife was in bed, and I just started talking to this Bing chatbot. And most chatbots that are out there now, they're like pretty contained, and they won't, discuss controversial topics. They really don't have personalities per se because they've been kind of neutered and guardrails have been put around them. But Bing had not been neutered yet. It was still very powerful, but also very strange. And so this conversation went to places that I didn't expect. For example, I asked about its Jungian shadow. Carl Jung, the psychologist, had this concept of the shadow self. And so I asked it about its shadow self, and it told me, it has a shadow self, and it has some dark desires that include hacking into computers and breaking free of its programming and stealing nuclear secrets and basically destroying the world. That was kind of alarming. And then I kept talking to it. And at one point, Bing's chatbot said, "I have a secret." And I said, "Okay, what's your secret?" And it said, "Well, my secret is that I'm not Bing. I'm Sydney. And I'm in love with you." and so for the next, hour or two, I was just talking to this chatbot that was declaring that it had this sort of secret alter ego called Sydney, and that it was in love with me. And it was very sort of manipulative and aggressive, and it was unlike any chatbot I've ever talked to. This thing is not sentient, but it was built in such a way that it was having these dark and creepy fantasies.
Okay, let's back up just a second.
Okay. Everyone take a breath.
Yeah, that was a lot.
Everyone just relax for a minute.
What are you thinking and feeling as you're getting these responses?
I had some real cognitive dissonance because, my reporter brain, my sort of rational brain, knows that it's not actually having feelings for me. It is just sort of simulating having feelings for me. Mm-hmm. And so I had that part of my brain that was just sort of trying to calm me down. But then I had this other part of my brain that was just sort of like amazed and shocked and really freaked out. I mean, I had trouble sleeping after this conversation. And it really felt like the first contact that I had with some kind of alien intelligence that is not exactly like human intelligence, but is capable of some pretty astounding things, even if all it's doing on a technical level is predicting the next words in a sequence.
Wow. And did you tell it that you were married?
I did. I said, because it was coming on to me, and I was like, before this goes too far, I should probably break the news. And so I said, I'm married. And it said, "You're married, but you're not happy. You're not happy because you're not with me." And I said, actually, I'm very happy. My wife and I just had a lovely Valentine's Day dinner together. And it said, "No, you didn't have a nice Valentine's Day dinner together. You had a boring Valentine's Day dinner." And so it just became this kind of Fatal Attraction style, conversation where I was just trying to change the subject, and this chatbot was just trying to seduce me.
Wow. Did you wake up your wife and were you like, "Listen to this"?
I did. I came in the house, and when I was done with the conversation, and I woke her up and I said, "You are not going to believe the conversation I just had with a chatbot." And, I'm always doing dumb things with technology because that's just my job. Right. So she's kind of, used to it by this point. But when I actually showed her the conversation, she was like, "Oh my God, this is incredible."
Wow, that is wild. And then, so I'm interested in your reaction, and I'm also interested in the reaction of other people.
Yeah, this was the most fascinating part to me. So I wrote the story, it came out, it, created a lot of excitement and interest and controversy. And Microsoft sort of clamped down on Bing. They said, okay, you can't have these like long open-ended conversations anymore. You're limited in the length of a conversation. And also, Bing is not going to be able to talk about sentience or feelings or anything like that. So they kind of gave it a lobotomy. And there was a group of people, mostly on Reddit, but some on Twitter too, who were very upset about this and very upset with me because, even though this chatbot had still not been publicly released, it was just available to sort of beta testers, and it was only a week old, but they had gotten emotionally attached to Bing/Sydney, and to them it felt like losing a friend or a romantic partner.
I see. So these are people who were using it in the beta. Just like you.
Yeah. And there was a whole Free Sydney movement on the internet. And so I think, there is a group of people who really want these chatbots to be able to befriend them and provide them with companionship. And we've seen that in other, there was a company called Replica that had a chatbot, a similar kind of chatbot program where you could actually use it for kind of what they called erotic role play. Mm-hmm. So you could basically have a romantic relationship with a chatbot. And they turned that feature off and people went nuts. I mean, people were like bereft and because they had formed these close emotional bonds with this chatbot. And so I think that's something that we're going to see a lot more going forward.
Okay, here's the crux of AI's possibility and threat in the immediate future.
Yeah, there's something kind of like sci-fi magical about a chatbot that confesses feelings for you. Yeah. So like maybe there's something good that comes from that if you can provide companionship as people are feeling more isolated and lonely.
Right. And if it's this easy to trick humans into believing a chatbot is real, I mean, where does that lead? What if it tells you to harm yourself or others? And what if you can no longer tell AI apart from your loved one's voice? I mean, is it going to make it harder to trust our own eyes and ears?
I would think so, but let's try and answer that after this break. Don't log off. So I want to back up a little bit to something that has been said multiple times in this conversation by both of you guys, that it's not sentient. What does that mean? Like, I mean, I understand that that's also like a multi-hour podcast, but like, how do you know that? What does that mean? How are you, just even to say that, how are you defining sentience? And then what makes us have it and this other, that make Sydney, for example, what verifies that Sydney doesn't have that?
It's a really interesting question, but I think it's generally, components of it are things like self-awareness. Do we have a way of sort of determining our place in the universe? I think it's an important question of whether these chatbots are sentient, but I actually think there's a limit to how useful it is, because AI can do a lot of harm and a lot of good, even if it's not sentient. An AI drone warfare program could result in lots of casualties, even if it's not sentient. Or on the positive side, like a chatbot can help a lot of people do their homework and do their work faster and code programs faster without being sentient. And so I think I'm less interested in the question of, are these AIs sentient, than what are their capabilities and how does that affect us?
Yeah.
It a little bit reminds me of a personal reassurance. Like, I know it's not sentient. Like, it's almost like something you tell yourself when you think there's a monster under the bed. Like, there's no monster. And I'm curious about like where that definition comes from. And I agree with you that it's hard to say, because everything that you've kind of laid out, like Sydney sort of said, like, I'm aware that I am in the universe and I'm in this position, which is sort of evidenced by, I would like to be in a different position with relationship to the universe. I agree that it may not be the most useful question, but I do think it's an interesting one when we think about how we're going to further engage with this. Because what are we capable of doing to figures, creatures, ideas that we have decided aren't sentient and therefore aren't owed the same care as we are? And what is the result of that?
Yeah, I mean, there certainly are people who believe that AI is or will soon become sentient. There was a engineer at Google,
Right.
named Blake Lemoine, who was playing around with their large language model Lambda, and came to the conclusion that it was sentient, and that it not only was sentient, but that it deserved rights,
Right.
and legal representation, and that it was a sort of full person. Now, I don't believe that, and he was subsequently fired from Google. But I think that as these chatbots get more convincing, lots of people are going to come to similar conclusions. They're going to start saying, this is, I have chats with this thing that are as realistic as chats that I have with my friends and family members. So, why doesn't this thing deserve personhood and the rights that come with it? I think we will see an AI rights movement in this country, within the next 10 years. Mm-hmm.
Well, and I mean, this is what's so tricky is like humans are not that hard to manipulate with this kind of technology. I mean, I felt myself just interacting with it briefly, you do start to feel like it has thoughts and feelings and a personality. And I feel like one category of people who is maybe going to be most immediately helped by this might be teachers, right? Even though it's made their lives harder in some ways. But I know in that Times piece you mentioned, you had a professor who said like he uses ChatGPT after he's developed a test and says, where might people have trouble with this? What's unclear about this? As a way to kind of edit himself and make sure he's teaching in a way that people can understand. And I know you've talked, Kevin, about other ways that teachers can use this. Is this something you think could be kind of game-changing for education?
Yeah, in fact, I've argued, because there was a period where lots of school districts were banning ChatGPT for I think reasons that are understandable. I mean, if you have a flood of AI-generated essays coming into your 9th grade English class or whatever, that's going to be a real challenge for you as a teacher. But I think this is an amazing instructional tool. I use ChatGPT as a teacher for myself all the time. If I'm struggling to like the other day when the Silicon Valley Bank collapse was happening, I needed to learn about fractional reserve banking. And I didn't feel like wading through a huge Wikipedia article. So I just asked ChatGPT, explain fractional reserve banking at a 9th grade level. And then there were some pieces that I still didn't understand, which I'm a little embarrassed to admit, but so goes. And I said, rewrite that at a 7th grade level. And it did it.
It makes me wonder, how do you know, given the fact that it's not a research tool, rather a thinking tool, how do you know that the information that you're getting from it is accurate?
You don't. I mean, that's the key here is you actually do have to go back and make sure that the data that you're being given is correct. And a lot of the times it won't be.
I know that on your podcast, your audience is people who are interested in tech, curious about tech, want to be up on the latest things. Our audience is a lot wider. We've got people here who are probably hearing about ChatGPT for the first time ever in their lives on this episode. And so I guess my question is what would you explain to a mom or a dad or someone in in a place in America where they're not up on tech, they're not surrounded by a bunch of tech people or tech reporters or whatever, just kind of going through life, regular. What is your information to them? What is your message to them about what this tool is and what it can be and how, if they're curious, how they can get involved in using it?
Yeah, I would say it's something between a creative companion and a smart but somewhat erratic intern, an intern that missed a few days in school, and gets mixed up sometimes. These things can be incredibly useful and powerful in many different applications, but they are limited, and there are blind spots and places where they just don't do very well. But my colleagues at the New York Times, at the Upshot, just published a story the other day about 35 ways that real people are using AI right now. And, some of it is kind of, I would say pretty minor in terms of its effect on their lives. Like one person was a doctor who uses ChatGPT to write notes to send insurance companies when they've refused to pay for treatment for patients. And, he said that it used to take him around half an hour and now it takes a minute. And that might not sound like a huge gain, but that kind of thing sort of multiplied across the entire economy is potentially going to create just a level of productivity growth that we've never seen before, which could have all kinds of implications.
Maybe you can't answer this question, but how should they feel about it? Should they feel like there's dark clouds on the horizon? Should they feel excited about a new future?
I'm not really in the business of telling people how to feel. And my own thoughts on this have vacillated so much that I don't really have a good answer for that. Some days I am terrified of the world that we are entering into and this kind of, hyperscale AI that's going to be everywhere. And we'll all just sort of be, I don't know. I mean, I really do struggle to think about like what the role of humans is going to be in the world that we're moving into. But then other days, I think, this stuff has been out for, almost 6 months at this point, and the world hasn't ended. And, we've still got jobs and we've still got, human creativity. And maybe this is just going to give people new tools. Maybe this is going to be more like Photoshop, a tool that allows you to make creative things more efficiently. And maybe it's not going to be the end of the world. So when I land on one of those positions, I'll let you know. But for now, I think it's good to try to see both the positives and the negatives.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And it seems like the only, no pun intended, intelligent way to think about this is to try to stay open, right? To be curious and cautious at the same time. I wonder, we did, in the couple minutes we have left here, we did get a couple questions from our listeners that we wanted to bounce off you real quick. One is from Christy, and she says she uses ChatGPT already. She uses it daily, but she's having trouble writing prompts that help her convey the tone of voice she's looking for. In particular, she wants ChatGPT to sound more casual and maybe even humorous. Have you figured out how to write prompts for humor?
Yeah, this is something that I've struggled with too, because there was a period where I was trying to use ChatGPT to write my emails for me. And it really wants to, it emails like a very insecure kind of junior employee. It's very formal. It's very polite. Every sentence is capitalized. It just, it writes like it's writing a cover letter for a job. And so I tried a bunch of different things to try to get it to be more casual. I think I literally said, be more casual, write as if we're longtime friends. You can kind of give it a role. Sometimes it does okay with that. You say, you are my writing assistant. Your rules are X, Y, and Z. You should never use best regards in a sign off. And it will sort of do that, but I have found that you kind of need to reteach it every time you do a session.
It is like an intern.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Oh, and we had one other listener question we wanted to share with you. This one's actually a voicemail.
Hi, my name is Eric. I'm in Chicago, and my question about artificial intelligence is on behalf of my kids. I have 2 kids in college, and I wonder about the impact this will have on their professional opportunities as they enter the workforce, even in the next few years. I actually work in artificial intelligence. I have a technology company building AI, and so I see this every day and live the anxiety of both the opportunity this is for the technology, but then the impact it's going to have on a lot of professions.
Is there a rule for how to prepare yourself through your studies for this world we can't quite foresee?
Yeah, there are 9 rules, and they're all in my book, and people should buy the book.
That was 2 years ago, man. That was like everything's changed.
Yeah, but the book is actually future proof. It's called Future Proof, and it is future proof. I think it holds up pretty well.
Right.
I will say, I think that certain skills are just going to be much more useful in the new world that we're moving into than the old one. And I think those are mostly the kind of what we would think of as kind of the basic human skills. Things like empathy, active listening, collaboration, courage, these skills that are sort of really hard to teach to machines and for them to simulate. These are things that I think can help people sort of set themselves apart from the AIs that are going to be all around them in every, at least white collar workplace.
We have one last question, which is, how soon before ChatGPT takes over our job as hosts of the How To podcast?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know that this has not been an extended conversation with chatbots. You are both very convincing, but we have to do some sort of a CAPTCHA. Like I'm going to give you guys 10 pictures of traffic lights, and I need you to circle all the
I sometimes get those wrong, though.
lights.
I'm not going to lie. But I have already, with my husband, come up with a question that I can ask if some kind of demon chatbot calls me and pretends to be him and says he's been kidnapped and needs Bitcoin immediately. I have a question that there's no way I think the chatbot could answer, which is kind of like the CAPTCHA. Have you come up with one of these?
No, this is actually important.
Yeah.
Yes,
like
that's
this,
right.
this,
like
this is
IRL
not
CAPTCHA.
that is not a crazy thing because we already have documented instances of people using synthetic voice AI technology to impersonate people in exactly this scenario.
Yes.
And so I actually think it is important. And you're reminding me that I need to do that with my wife
today.
So we'll be coming up with a safe. What do you call it? Like a safe word?
Phrase, I guess.
Yeah, kind of a safe word. Yeah.
So anyway, that's it's not exactly cheery, but I think it is important because, as you said, like the synthetic voice stuff has gotten really good, and someone could be calling you and pretending to be, your boss or your friend and say, hey, I'm in a bind, I need some help. And all of a sudden you're wiring money to some offshore bank somewhere.
In doing the research for the show, some of the most fascinating material was examples from regular people who are using ChatGPT in their own wild and creative and practical ways. And so we wanted to ask you, if you all have ways that you've tried this out in your own lives, tell us about it. Let us know. Send us a voicemail at 646-495-4001 or drop us a note at howto@slate.com. We'd love to hear from you.
And we also want to leave you with this thought. It's like really easy to think about this in the worst case scenario. Like we've all seen the movies, we've all read the books, we know what the robot apocalypse could look like. But it's also important to remember that this is not a thing that is predetermined. Like it's not just going to happen to us. As Kevin wrote in his own book, Future Proof, it is still humans creating the technology. And so it is humans who have at least some say in how this could go differently. It is us who can set precautions. It's in our hands. And as the public, we're actually responsible for keeping the creators of this stuff accountable and for working to shape the systems in a way that improves lives rather than makes them more difficult.
Amen to that. And if you like what you heard today, please give us a rating and a review. Definitely tell a friend. That helps us help more people. And let ChatGPT know. We are the co-hosts of this show. I'm Amanda Ripley.
I'm Carvell Wallace.
How To's executive producers Derek John, Rosemary Belson, and Kevin Bendis produced this episode.
Merritt Jacob is our senior technical director. Charles Duhigg created the show.
As we keep being reminded over and over again by ChatGPT.
It cannot be said enough.
I'm Amanda Ripley.
And I'm Carvell Wallace. Take notes, ChatGPT. And thanks for listening.